This is the Book Legion Podcast, where we review thought-provoking books to give our Legionnaires the knowledge they need to dominate the next level of their life.
Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of the Book Legion. This is your host, Tyzer Evans. This week, I'm going to be reviewing the book Turning Pro by Pressfield. So for those of you who may not know Pressfield, he's been around a long time, but got his literary start very late in life, which he talks about a lot through this book, his journey. He was a truck driver. He was someone that kind of had a nomadic type lifestyle, always wanting to be a writer. And this is really kind of what the book is about. It's really about his journey of going from amateur to pro. And so that's the basis of the book. But he's best well known for writing The War of Art, not The Art of War. I had a hard time with that as first. The book got recommended to me by Rod Cleef, who was a guest on my podcast, Grind, Sell, Elevate. And he just said it was one of the books that really helped change his mind frame, that he recommends this book, Turning Pro. I haven't read The War of Art, but I do own it. And I just picked up Do the Work as well by Pressfield. He also writes some nonfiction books. So this is what he does. He lives in Los Angeles. He talks about how he's an honorary citizen of Sparta in Greece, but he writes full time. That's what he does now. But the book is really about his journey of what it takes to go from living your amateur life to turning professional and becoming a professional, whatever your given career is, or whatever your dream is, or whatever your life goals are, right? Whatever it is, that desire inside of you. That's what the book's based on. So I'm going to talk about my three favorite takeaways. There's three sections to the book. It's relatively short. It's about 130 pages. And each page is within the section is like his own chapter. So let's jump into my three favorite takeaways. So the first one is on page 13, which is just shadow career. And so I really love this concept of a shadow career, and I wanted to read you guys a quote because for me, it really spoke to me when you start diving into. I think this is it's on page 13, but it's really only a few pages into the book, and so it grasped my attention right away because it resonated so well with me. Sometimes when we are terrified of embracing our true calling, we pursue a shadow calling instead. That shadow career is a metaphor for our real career. Its shape is similar, its contours feel tangentially the same, but a shadow career entails no real risk. If we fail at the shadow career, the consequences are meaningless to us. And so this is kind of where the book starts, this whole shadow career. And I think of myself as far as my corporate career, which I just actually left last week. But what I had been doing is I had been working for somebody in the safety security of having a job. Meanwhile, thinking about jumping out onto my own, and even knowing consciously that the skill set that I was using while working for someone else is the exact same skill set that I'd be using out on my own, building my own business, right? There's really no difference, but I'm in this shadow career where I have the safety and the comfort of someone giving me a paycheck versus putting it all on the line and having to turn pro and having to be a professional and having to show up every day the best me, right? And putting the risk out there. So this amateur life is all about how to start to make this mental mind shift and realizing that there's a lot of things that we do to hold ourselves back. And so this is what the book starts to really explore. So shadow career on page 13, it's only about a half a page, but it was one that just hit me, like punched me right in the gut. And interestingly enough, I've been reading this book while I made my transition and my journey. The second one is on page 39, which is Addicted to Distraction, which, I wanted to cover because of the type of environment that we live in today, right? We're all distracted. We get pulled in a million different ways, especially by our phone. I'm getting to the page for those that are watching me on YouTube. The phone, I turn off all of my notifications personally, but if you've got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and say YouTube, right? And you have your notifications on just for those four platforms, let alone text messages, phone calls, and the million other apps that we have that are all trying to get our attention. Like you'll be distracted all day just from your notifications. And so I just want to read you a quote on page 39, which is Addicted to the Distraction. Resistance wants to keep us shallow and unfocused. So it makes the superficial and the vain intoxicating. And that's just kind of exactly what I'm talking about, right? The superficial, the highlight reels of Instagram and Facebook, they're completely intoxicating. We get that dopamine hit. and it feels good. So I think the average person checks their Instagram account, it's like over 50 times a day. So it's just like, all we're looking for is that one little like, right? That one little comment to give us this dopamine hit, but it's a complete distraction. Like this, it just talks about the next line after that. Have you checked your email in the last half hour? When you sit down to do your work, do you leave the web connection on? It can be fatal. Keeping up with the Kardashians. And that's the end of the chapter. And so again, it's just a subtle reminder that when you're turning pro and you are going all in on what you're doing, you have to eliminate distractions. It's all about showing up and doing the work to the best of our ability every day. So that's in section 1, which is about being an amateur. Section 2 is about the self-inflicted wounds, self-sabotage, limiting belief systems. And then the last section is all about, turning into a professional. So I did want to read you one more quote from page 53, which is in Self-Inflicted Wounds, part 2. And this is, the amateur is terrified. Fear is the primary color of the amateur's interior world. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of looking foolish, fear of underachieving, fear of overachieving, fear of poverty, fear of loneliness, fear of death. But mostly what we all fear as amateurs is being excluded from the tribe, i.e. the gang, the posse, mother and father, family, nation, race, religion. The amateur fears that if he turns pro and lives out his calling, he will have to live up to who he really is and what he is truly capable of. The amateur is terrified that if the tribe should discover who he really is, he will be kicked out in the cold to die. That's the whole chapter right there. And that's the amateur being terrified. And why I like that is because he talks a lot about this tribe, and I've read the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger and how we're kind of meant to not really be in tribes more than 100, which is why, Sebastian Junger doesn't think that big cities work. But what I really like, and he talks about in the subsequent pages about the amateur is terrified, is there is no tribe, right? We're always so egotistical. We're always worried about what other people are thinking of us, how we dress, what we wear, what we say, maybe our accent, where we come from. But the reality is, people don't give a shit. People don't care, because as you're being so self-absorbed, worrying about what everybody else is thinking about you, so is every other person. Every other person is walking around just thinking about themselves and what everybody else is worried about thinking about them, right? But we're all just really walking around thinking that everyone else is judging us. Well, really, the only person that's really judging us is ourselves. And so because of this, we're scared of losing our identity within our confines, our construct of society, that we become terrified to take a risk because of the perceived judgments that we may or may not get. And the whole point of this is that you're not going to get them, right? Your tribe doesn't really give a shit. And if they do care, on the off chance that someone does say something, then they probably shouldn't be in your tribe to begin with. So, and this book has a lot of parallels and talks a lot about addiction, and not so much, it does talk about, drugs and alcohol, but it's really just about the addictions that we have mentally, the addiction of sex, or the addiction of the internet, right? Addiction of reading books. But really what an addiction is, and again, it's another metaphor for a distraction. So, love the book, Turning Pro, Tap Your Inner Power and Create Your Life's Work is the subtitle. Again, by Stephen Pressfield. The book was only $10, so I'll put a link in the show notes to swoop down and grab it. It said I started it on Tuesday, and finished it today on Thursday, so it took me about, 2.5 days to read. Really simple, but it's a page turner too, because you start to identify, and if you can be self-critical and put your ego to the side, you'll recognize that a lot of the things they're talking about in this book, you do. Or at least for me, I did. So it was really great book. Obviously, that's why I'm covering it. So check it out, Stephen Pressfield. If you guys haven't done so, please subscribe to the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't checked out my other podcast, Grind, Sell, Elevate, it's available on all platforms. And this is a more of an interview style platform where I interview business leaders, thought leaders from sales, leadership, SEO, health and wellness and fitness, kind of like the Book Legion, where I bring on the best of the best in different pillars of your life. but it's more business centric, and it's an interview style podcast where I talk to people for 35, 40, 45 minutes, sometimes even an hour. So unlike these, we're short, get your information, go get your book and get off, right? But again, thank you so much for your support. Now we're in over 80 different countries. Legionnaires are growing. I get all kinds of DMs on the website every day, thebooklegion.com, thanking me and suggesting different books. So appreciate it. Keep it coming. Again, you can go to thebooklegion.com and drop me a line if you want me to review a book or if you have a suggestion. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening.